On this episode of Marmalade Mysteries, Georgia and Ariel ask the question, who killed Meredith Kercher? And they discuss the controversial case of Amanda Knox. Stay tuned, Marmaladers, and we'll see you soon on the other side.
Hey guys, welcome to Marmalade Mysteries. I'm Ariel.
I'm Georgia.
I'm Lisa.
And I'm Olivia.
We are four best friends brought together by our interest of true crime and mystery.
Through the years we lived together, we constantly talked and tried to solve cold cases and mysteries from around the world.
Plus, we really just like the sound of our own voices. So, we decided to put it out in the podcast world so all of you can hear how funny we think we are.
Each week, you'll hear one murder
and one mystery.
We'll also feature a missing person because we believe in the power of communities to find lost people.
So, pour yourself a hot cup of joe,
settle in,
and brace yourself
for Marmalade Mysteries.
Hey, Ariel.
What's up, Georgia?
Did you know that we're recording a podcast?
Aren't we always recording a podcast?
It does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. But good thing we enjoy it.
Yeah, and we like each other's company.
I mean,
Here.
Sure.
What?
I'm kidding.
Ouch.
Georgia.
Yeah, Ariel.
Why would I do a combined thing with you if I didn't love you?
That's right. We are going to do a combined thing today.
I'm here too, but I'm just listening.
Hey, Libby.
It's like a private audience for Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia, I think you're gonna really like today's episode. I know you know a little bit about our episode, but do you know anything about Amanda Knox?
So I've seen, everybody's heard the name, right? But I think I just saw the Netflix documentary that came out maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So it'll be interesting to hear a little bit more. Give me a little more insight.
Well, buckle up, buddy, because we got lots for you.
We do. Okay, so this story was requested by a listener. I think the name is Blancs06. Ariel, I'm looking at you for confirmation.
Maybe.
I see that on my thing. I've seen the tag, which is really lovely. It's nice to have followers. So she requested it in our little chat, and we decided, you know what, why not? Let's go ahead. Let's do it.
Yeah, so thank you, Blancs06. And everyone else, let us know if there's something that you want to hear from us. Why are you guys laughing?
I'm only laughing because we sound so weird.
I don't know why, but I think with Lisa gone, it's just it feels like we're talking to ourselves. I don't know.
Right. Olivia really Lisa really throws in the the weird stuff that brings us all together, isn't it?
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't listen to last episode, Lisa is a travel nurse and she's working in LA for the next few weeks. So she's not with us. She can't be recording with us, but she's out there doing really important work. And obviously we're really proud of her. And LA has the best nurse in the world.
Also, if you didn't listen to our last episode, boo.
Guys, I didn't even know it was LA. In my head, it was just California.
She covers all of California.
Yeah, she's that good of a nurse. Well, I don't know if Lisa would like me telling the world where she is, but LA's a big place, right? It's like saying they're in New York.
It's gritty, man. It's gritty.
Are you ladies going to get started?
Yeah. Georgia, you starting out or?
Oh, sure.
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, I don't mind either. Whatever you want, April.
Okay. Sure, I'll start it then. All right.
I want to clarify something. You may notice in a couple of episodes, Georgia calls Ariel April. Ariel's name is Ariel. It's not April. It's just Georgia likes to say April for some reason because it annoys Ariel. But now Ariel loves it. So don't get confused.
Yeah. It's turned into a term of endearment.
It started with a joke and it became something that I now respond to very frequently. Okay, but really, Amanda, who also has some nicknames.
Let's get it, Amanda.
Let's set the scene. On November 2nd, 2007, the Perugia police received a phone call from a frantic girl who came home after spending the night with her boyfriend and found blood in the bathroom and her roommate, Meredith Kercher's bedroom door locked. When the police arrived, they found Meredith Kercher stabbed on the bedroom floor. She was undressed and her neck had suffered a deep slash. She had been sexually assaulted and repeatedly stabbed, with a blanket semi-covering her. There was money and items, such as her keys, missing from her room. She was currently living with 3 other girls. One of them, the girl who called the police, an American named Amanda Knox. Nope, that's not right. I swear to fucking God, as soon as I said it, I was like, that's not right.
That was so good because the entire story would have changed.
Well, they wouldn't have called her Foxy Noxy. They would have called her like Cox McGee or something.
Oh my God. Okay. All
I'm
right.
so sorry. Her name was... The American girl's name was Amanda Knox. Her 2 phones were found in a nearby garden, which was thought to be odd because she usually carried them with her.
So, a little bit about Meredith Kercher. Meredith Kercher was born on December 28th, 1985, to parents John and Arlene Kercher. The family was from Colston, Ariel?
Colston, yeah.
Okay. Colston, England. She was the youngest of 4 children and went to a private school growing up. She attended university in Leeds, and to her friends, she was known as kind, shy, and lovely. Meredith chose Italy for her exchange trip because she believed it was one of the less dangerous of the options that she had. Her parents recall her being invested in the trip, wanting to immerse herself in the culture and language. Friends who had met her in Italy recalled her being a wonderful person, always caught smiling in photographs, but she didn't always get along with one of her roommates. 3 months after leaving Leeds for Perugia.
I'm just guessing. Right? I'm so sorry, Italy.
Yeah, I don't know either. 3 months after leaving Leeds for Perugia, Italy, Meredith was found dead. So she wasn't in Italy very long after, she was murdered.
Yeah. So we talked about the American roommate. So who was Amanda Knox? Amanda Knox was a 20-year-old woman who was also in a study abroad opportunity from Seattle. To her friends, she seemed outgoing and really smart. That day, she returned back to her Italian apartment, the one that she shared with Meredith and her 2 other Italian roommates, after having spent the night at her boyfriend's house, Raphael Solicito. According to Amanda, she had gotten the evening shift off from her manager, Patrick Lumumba. She says she noticed several out-of-ordinary things as she came home that day, including the front door being ajar and evidence of specks of dried blood in the sink. Even though these things were odd, Amanda thought little of it and proceeded to have a shower. Once finished showering, she noticed a bloody footprint on the bath mat and feces in the toilet of the apartment, suggesting that someone might have been or was in the house. Scared, she called one of her flatmates, Filomena Romanelli, about the possible intruder and also her boyfriend to investigate further. They found a smashed window in Formanelli's bedroom, as well as Meredith's door locked, and decided to call the police. The local carabinieri? I think I just butchered that.
That's okay. I don't know either.
Yeah, carabinieri. We promise we'll work on our
on our Italian.
Yeah. Once they arrived, they knocked down Meredith's door where they found her dead.
Okay, sorry. So you said that she first called one of her flatmates and then her boyfriend before she called the police.
Yes, yeah. And then the roommate came home after they realized that Meredith's door was locked, and when the roommate came home, that's when she was like, "You need to call the police."
Okay.
Yeah, and I think they were the 2 the 2 Italian roommates. I think they were both paralegals, or they were in law school.
Yeah, they were studying to be lawyers, I think, is what it said.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I got you.
Okay, so during the autopsy, they concluded that there had been a sexual component to Meredith's death and an immense struggle. She had been held down at the arms, she had nicks from a sharp instrument to her chin, and she had someone's DNA under her someone's DNA and their hair underneath her nails. Also at the scene, we didn't mention this earlier, but they found bloody fingerprints in her bedroom. So like on the wall there was a bloody handprint like of fingers at the top. So that comes into play later. Um
Was it a lot of blood, or was it just like dabs of blood? Do you know?
the photos from I got a lot of my information from the Netflix documentary. It didn't look like it was a bloodbath. Like when you think of like what a crime scene when a girl has been stabbed in the neck, I could imagine that it could be really bloody. From what I could tell, it didn't look that bloody. I mean, there was the bloody footprint, which I always think, I don't know why, but bloody feet print of a bare foot to me is so unnerving. It's like the person was inside the house and comfortable enough to not be wearing shoes.
Right.
So
Also,
was on the
yeah, scary enough to just put their own bare skin in mixing it with someone else's blood.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I just remember seeing like the smear of the handprint on the wall.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like there was like a whole bunch of blood, but they did find prints with
There wasn't like
blood.
blood splatter
Okay.
or anything like that, or that I remember seeing. But I mean, she was lying in a pool of her own blood. Okay, so then a week before the murder, Amanda met a young man by the name of Raphael at a classical music concert and spent every waking moment after meeting him together. On November 2nd, while the police were investigating the home and other aspects of Meredith's life, one of the police officers noticed that Amanda and her boyfriend were seen multiple times standing huddled together and kissing. This was flagged as odd behavior to be so intimate at, when they just found out that her roommate had been murdered. And you can see videos of this from reporters at the actual scene. And even at the police department, Amanda was seen sitting in Raphael's lap, clinging onto him like a koala bear. A passing officer told them to behave themselves, and Raphael later remarked that this behavior made him uncomfortable. But they had only known each other for a few days, and so
Right.
boundaries were weird.
I don't know. I don't know if it's weird. Like, I know that was kind of like a red mark for that, or that was like a red flag for them when it comes to relationships. I was definitely childish in a relationship at the age of 20. And like, if you just found out your roommate was murdered and you're 20 years old, of course you're going to get a little comfy with whoever you've been sleeping with for the past week, right? Like, I don't know. I just feel like that might be typical 20-year-old behavior.
See,
Yeah,
I just don't know because I feel like in my 20s, I still would have been somewhat shocked and more focused on what was happening in the house than focusing on who was next to me. I think that would be my perspective.
part of me wonders if it was just her looking for like physical comfort. Like she was
Right.
in the documentary, she mentioned that could have been me because she could have been home at the time when the murder actually took place. So maybe it was those thoughts that were going through her head that made her seek out that sort of comfort.
Yeah. And she's been with this guy. I know it's only been a week, but obviously they've been together every waking moment. She's in a foreign country. A murder was just committed in her own apartment. I think it is. I mean, to me, it sounds like she was just looking for comfort, and people may have saw that as like disrespectful. But also, she's 20 years old. She's not really thinking about like what's disrespectful in a foreign country, right? She's thinking about, oh my God, my roommate was just killed. Let me hold on to the only source of comfort I know right now.
A couple days after the murder, they were both interrogated. Amanda and Raphael were separated and asked to recall any information, any details about their whereabouts and what their relationship was like with Meredith.
So during the investigation, Knox ended up making a statement that ended up being really misleading, telling the authorities that she had been home at the time of the crime and had included her employer Patrick by accident. Amanda says that this conflicting evidence was due to the fact that the first time she was interviewed, there wasn't an interpreter there. She didn't have an attorney present, and the police had really tried to coerce her into saying what they needed. to have, because this was a high profile case for Italy and they wanted answers. While Amanda was at Sausalito's apartment the night of the murder, what had happened was she received a text from Patrick saying that she could have the night off from the bar that she was working at. When she responded to him in Italian, she sent back what she thought was a text saying that she would see him later and to have a good night. But when the police told her what she had actually said, that's where the confusion came in, because it translated into that she would see him later that night and that she must have met him that night but forgotten because the murder had been so traumatizing. This was when she changed her story to say that she was with Patrick and Cecilito at her home that night.
Okay, so her final statement is that she was with Patrick that night. Or are you saying she went back and said that's just what the police wanted her to say?
So essentially, yeah, the police made it sound like she had already said she was with Patrick. And because they were so hard on her, and, being a 20-year-old who's being investigated, that's really scary. So
In a language that you're still new to.
yeah, and without an interpreter, without a power of attorney or anything like that, in a foreign country where you have no support. Yeah, so but then she later said that she changed her story because, she was scared and stressed, just like we talked about, and they were telling her she was guilty. So they had already like made a decision that she was the one who did it. So Knox, Sausalito, and Patrick were taken into custody in July of 2008 and were formally charged with murder. Patrick was released 3 weeks later after giving an alibi. And in total, as far as custody, Amanda spent 1,428 days in custody without being able to see her family, which is like a really long time for a young 20-year-old who's probably the same amount of time into an exchange as Meredith was.
Yeah, that's like 4 years, isn't it?
I think she ended up spending 4 years in jail. Like
Okay.
at the end of all of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is just like the total, sorry, this is like the total of like time she didn't actually get to see her family.
Yeah.
Okay.
The year-long trial was greatly publicized and scrutinized by the public, as one journalist has reported in the Amanda Knox film. It was a reporter's dream, this case. She was given the nickname Foxy Knoxy, which translates to evil fox in Italian. This was a name that, just a fun name that she gave herself as a young kid. It was like on her MySpace page, and the tabloids went crazy with the theory of sexual games were being played, and that the American with the MySpace page with a profile photo with a fake machine gun had taken advantage of her sexually inexperienced boyfriend who was an engineering student, and that they killed Meredith in like this weird, like these weird rituals, and there was like this weird sex cult theory that was going around. It was just a media frenzy.
So they're trying to play her off as like the American devil.
Yeah.
Is what it sounds like, because it's at some point it's like her sexually inexperienced boyfriend. Like,
Yeah, that's literally what they
really?
said.
Really, Italy?
Yeah.
It was also,
Right?
I think I was reading too, the tabloid wise, it was drastically different between Italy and America, because Italy was playing up to these theories, whereas America was saying, oh, this student who's alone and afraid has just been charged with murder of her roommate in another country and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I heard some of it must have been, it was in English and it was in American accents. And I listened to some of the news reportings, and some of them were just as suggestive as the Italian. I don't know what they were saying in Italian, but there were some that I was like, that doesn't really seem like a fair representation of this 20-year-old. One tabloid wrote, the title of it was Lucifer-like, satanic, demonic, diabolical, a witch of deception. Another wrote Knox leads ritual killing. So there was a lot of fake information out there, a lot of, this girl wasn't going to go anywhere and get a fair trial because everyone in Italy knew who she was. I mean, everyone in England knew who she was. America, like, no matter, it was crazy.
It also feels like because of the way that the media had portrayed her, when you discuss this case, you can go one of two ways because obviously the media is trashing her the way that it does, that she is a devil. And so you can think, well, the media is the one that really pushed the Italian police's agenda, right? So she's innocent, really, but they made her out to be this horrible person. Or you can think otherwise and just say, well, they are saying these things because they have all of this evidence that they're not releasing, and she is guilty. And just because the media is making her out to be an enemy doesn't mean that she's not the enemy. And so it really plays up. It really played up this case, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. Like personally, going through it all it was difficult. You know, when you read something and you're like, oh yeah, I'm really starting to formulate an idea about this. It's got to be for this one. For this one, I think it's just so hard because one, it lasted so long. Two, the media had their way about it. I mean, most of the stuff I read wasn't actually like when you get down to the bottom of it. There's very little factual stuff happening here. Um, but because it was like blown up to such a big proportion, and like I said, Italy, it was a high profile case. England, it was obviously a high profile case as well because they didn't come from the same area. One came from America, one came from the UK, and then they're in a third country. That makes a difference as well. So I think it was just a lot of things that tied in together, and you're just unsure of what actually happened. So the prosecution theorized that the night of the 1st of November, Amanda had Sausalito and Rudy over. And when Meredith came home, she scolded Amanda for her behavior and Amanda attacked her. Then Rudy and Sausalito, wanting to please Amanda, partook in the attack. And when I say Rudy, I'm talking about Rudy Gude, who we're going to kind of break down a little bit further on. But yeah, that's kind of the theory that they went with. So in ties with that, mind games were played on her by the police, such as telling her she was HIV positive at one point and that she was going to die, slapping her on the back of the head during interrogation, and taking advantage of the language barriers. So, like we talked about, she didn't have an interpreter, she didn't have a power of attorney at the time. So it's really hard to like navigate what's happening when you don't understand the language. Her prison diary was leaked to the public, which led to the public having a really altered view of her. When she thought she had HIV, because that's what the doctors had told her, she wrote down all the names of the boys that she had slept with and wrote next to their names whether or not they had used protection. And she also wrote just like how scared she was and how much she didn't want to die. And the media took this and they really just like put it on full blast. I think the journalist in the film too was like, well, journalists never reveal their sources, but this was like a huge thing for us.
He seemed like an interesting character in the documentary because he was also talking about how he would, after court would close for the day, he would go stand next to the prosecution, and the prosecution would just like slip him his notes, and then he'd go over and make some copies and take the notes back so that way he could look over the notes at the end of the day from court that day. It just didn't seem like, I mean, she was not getting a fair trial because it was trial by media, essentially.
It sounds like they were definitely trying to push an agenda, and they, of course, used the media. And then, like you said, it just doesn't give her a fair trial. Whether she's guilty or not, we won't know because they had already pushed her in a direction to where everybody already has doubts now.
Yeah, exactly. So, as far as evidence, true evidence goes, the knife that was used in the murder still hasn't been found. However, a knife closely matching the style of the knife that was used to kill Meredith was found in Sausalito's home. After DNA testing was done, Meredith's DNA, a very, very small amount of Meredith's DNA was found on the blade, and Amanda's DNA was found on the handle. Amanda is still unsure as to how that would have happened. And at the crime scene, Meredith's bra had been ripped off her body, and the clasp was disconnected from the rest of the bra. and Sausalito's DNA was found on this clasp, but none of the fingerprints left behind at the scene belonged to Amanda or Sausalito. However, they did belong to a man named Rudy Gude.
So it's so hard to like hear that they found this evidence and then also say, well, how can I trust this evidence, right? They've already shown us that they're trying to push an agenda, and you want to believe that this is real evidence, but the police have already showed that, like, especially with telling Amanda that she had HIV when she didn't.
I feel like that should be illegal.
Exactly. How?
Yeah, I don't know how they got away with that.
So now you're questioning on everything that the police are telling you that they found, because they've already lost the people's trust by saying these things, especially using like doctors to tell Amanda something like that.
Yeah. So the lead prosecutor is interviewed in this documentary, and I don't know. I think he really thinks that he was right, 100%. We'll get to him in a minute.
Who was Rudy Gude? He was a friend of their neighbors. He had a very informal relationship where they would sometimes hang out, but Amanda didn't even really know his name. He had a few burglary charges as well. Goudet said that he went to see Meredith on the 1st of November and that they were hanging out, but he didn't do anything because neither of them had a condom. So he went to the toilet, and when he came out, he heard Meredith screaming. He said over the phone to the police that, "I saw this guy. I didn't see his face because it was too dark." Then he ran out the front door and he saw Meredith, who was bleeding. She had a cut on her throat. She was clinging on to him strongly. And he goes, "I got scared. I was completely covered with blood." And he says this is why he fled to Germany. Rudy later said to a friend via chat on Skype, one thing, Amanda had nothing to do with this. She wasn't even there. He was then returned to Italy from Germany. He later changed the story, and at the trial, he said he saw Amanda at the crime scene and he saw her silhouette leaving the crime scene. Rudy was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in jail for his part in the murder. On appeal, his sentence was reduced to 16 years. And his partial release happened actually in 2007, or in not 2007. It was somewhere, I forget the year, but so he could attend school. He had like a partial release so he could go to school. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Okay, so he sounds more like our man, because I do remember them talking about Rudy. And to me, listening to it, it doesn't sound like Amanda had enough motivation to kill her. That's always what I go back to. We talked about it with Darlie Rudier. We talked about it with John Benet Ramsey. If the person doesn't look like they have enough motivation to do it, then why would they do it? Unless they're an actual psychopath serial killer, if they have multiple murders and they enjoy it, that's different. But they're, as far as I know, Amanda didn't show enough motivation. Rudy, on the other hand, he already admitted that him and Meredith wanted to sleep together, but they didn't because they didn't have a condom. He already admitted of being in the bedroom with her that night, and that he saw her that night after she was hurt. And then he blames a dark figure, and then and says that Amanda had nothing to do with it. Then he gets caught, brought back to Italy, and apparently now Amanda has everything to do with it. It just doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, and like one of the biggest things is like, okay, this happened, but you fled to Germany? Like it just seems too big of a thing to do. Um I know, it's Europe and it's not I as far as Italy and Germany go, they're not far apart, are they? But
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but maybe I should look them up. This American brain.
So my other question is, did Amanda ever say that her and Rudy were together at all that night?
No. The only person that she ever said that she was with, the only people, sorry, was Sausalito, Raphael, and Patrick. And she only said Patrick because she thought that that's what the police wanted her to say.
Right. So at that point, we could say either Amanda didn't even know Rudy was at her apartment that night, or she knew that Rudy had fled and didn't want to rat him out.
She is on record as saying that she didn't even know that man's name. So I kind
Okay.
of think that she didn't even really know him. He was more of a casual acquaintance because I think he was friends with the downstairs neighbors.
And it sounds like he had a closer relationship with Meredith, obviously, if he was in her bedroom.
Yeah.
And Amanda and Meredith didn't really get along, so I'm sure that even if he was close to Meredith, Amanda wouldn't even know.
So 2 years after the murder, Amanda Knox and Rafael Sausalito's sentence was handed down. The courts found them guilty. Sausalito was sentenced to 25 years and Amanda was sentenced to 26 years. And the mobs outside the courthouse were crazy that day. A year after the guilty verdict, Amanda and Rafael begin their first round of appeals. Sorry, Amanda and Sausalito begin their first round of appeals, and the appeal court determines that the DNA from the knife and the bra clasp should be re examined. The appeal attorneys made it clear that the booties at the crime scene were not changed, gloves were rarely changed, and that it was complete chaos. You can see people,
Oh.
yeah, you can see people coming in and out of the crime scene, and it's people are swarming it.
So it was a sloppy job.
It was a sloppy job. So, an independent DNA examiner mentioned that the bra clasp used to put away Amanda and Raphael was found under a small rug in Meredith's room 46 days after the murder.
It's just too long, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
why was that crime scene not examined thoroughly
Under a rug.
under a small rug? Yeah.
46 days,
46
though.
days. That's more than a month
But that also,
later.
you know what that tells you, right? Like, if they're searching this room for over a month, they are really looking. They don't have enough. They're really looking for some details to give them literally anything about this case.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. They say that other people's DNA, I'm sorry, the independent DNA examiner said that other people's DNA could have been brought in through via contamination, and that there were also 2 other unidentified DNA found on the clasp. So it wasn't just Raphael's DNA that was found, there were also 2 other people's. And the lab said that there were problems with cross contamination as well. The DNA found on the knife was so small and so scarce that the likelihood of cross contamination was high. The independent examiner said that anytime that you have DNA evidence so small, that it's actually determined to be inconclusive. And that's what it should have been determined as, because it was so small, it was likely that it was cross contamination.
Yeah, because like you have to, I was thinking about this last night too. You have to like really think about it. I mean, Meredith and Amanda were roommates or flatmates, and Sausalito was probably over there all the time in the 5 days that they had been dating, like back and forth. It wasn't just her going over to his apartment. So the likelihood of like that cross contamination is really high because this isn't just like a one off meeting. Like they spent I mean, we already talked about it. They spent almost every single day together since they had met at that concert. And yeah.
Exactly. And if Sausalito's DNA on the bra clasp is enough for him to be found guilty of murder, then those other 2 people whose DNA was found need to be investigated as well.
Especially if now, and I don't know how much time Sausalito spent at Meredith and Amanda's apartment, but for example, if he's staying over and he takes a shower in their shower and then Meredith goes right in right after him at some point and she's undressing and her bra is there in the same bathroom where he had just taken a shower, the likeliness of his DNA on her bra clasp is pretty high. If you're thinking about someone who's sharing closed quarters with each other.
Agreed. That's something that they briefly talk about in the documentary as well, how easy it is to like leave DNA somewhere. It could be just like a very simple like just touch.
Yeah. So 4 years after the murder of Meredith, the appeal case brought down a new verdict. not guilty. They were released on October 3rd, 2011. After spending 4 years, like we had said, in prison, no contact with family, they were free. Amanda Knox ended up flying home to the US that very next day.
I'm sure she was like, get me out of
Yeah,
here.
honestly, if that was me, I would do the exact same thing. I would be on the next flight home because if I've been locked up for 4 years in a foreign country where I don't completely understand the language, I mean, at this point, she probably does because she's had to be immersed in it, but I would be like,
Yeah.
"No."
Hell no. Yeah, I think she did. I think she did because she you could see her speaking Italian at her appeal court, and it sounded very natural. But yeah, no, I wouldn't be sticking around to go visit the Leaning Tower of Pisa or anything. I'd be like, we're
No.
going home.
I'd be like, "I'm never coming to Italy again," although she did.
But the thing is at that point, she's 24 years old. You're 24 years old. You just spent 4 years in prison, in a foreign prison. Of course you're going to leave. 24 is still a baby. You're still
Yeah.
really young.
Yeah, you're still figuring out life.
Yeah. So sad. Okay, so 6 years after the murder in 2013, the Italian court threw out Amanda and Raphael's acquittal, and the two were again found guilty. The guilty verdict focused this time on the circumstantial evidence, such as Amanda's behavior and relationships. Amanda was sentenced to 28.5 years, and Raphael was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Then, 8 years after the murder, so we're going from 2013 to 2015.
Wait, Ariel, they didn't have to go back to prison for that, did they?
No, because they were sentenced again, but they didn't end up going back to prison for it. They were in another set of appeals, I think.
Okay. Because I don't know what the extradition laws are between the US and Italy, but
I mean, I would say they're there.
they're
Like,
I mean,
I
I could be wrong, but that's what I read on. So I didn't take from the movie. I took from like the history document that I was reading
Right,
about
right.
Amanda Knox.
Yeah.
That they were again given hefty sentences.
Jeez.
When she flew back to the US, what does the US do if Italy's like, hey, bring her back? You know, like I don't really know at that point, like if the US could fight it or if they're like, well, yeah, okay, wait, you have to go back. I don't really know what it looks like between
I
those
don't know
two.
either.
Okay, so 8 years after the murder, we're now in 2015. The overturn went to the Supreme Court to see if it would hold up at a higher court. This brought about their exoneration. The court blamed stunning flaws and the media attention for creating a frantic search for guilty parties. The justices found a complete lack of biological traces pointing to Amanda or Raphael, and they uphold that Rudy committed the crime alone.
Today, Amanda Knox is an activist and an author. She has been on TV shows, she has a Netflix movie, and has written a book, and also co-hosts a podcast about true crime. Raphael and Amanda are no longer romantically involved as she is married to someone else. He runs an internet company, and it's crazy to think that at the time of the murders, they had only known each other for 5 days.
Not her husband, Raphael.
Oh, yeah. Surprise.
Okay, guys, but we've all seen the Lizzie McGuire movie and we all wanted to be Lizzie McGuire for a few days. So, I mean,
It's
can
like
we blame her?
It's like Lizzie McGuire gone wrong.
Yeah, it's like
Yes,
the adult version of Lizzie McGuire. It's like the X-rated
Yeah.
version of Lizzie McGuire.
Amanda reports that the crimes that happened that day are heavy and live in infamy with her. In 2019, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, officially confirmed that Knox's defense rights had been violated in police questioning during the 2007 trial and ordered Italy to pay Knox $20,000 in legal costs and damages.
Yeah, so that's like confirmation that even the European Court of Human Rights said it is completely unacceptable what they did to her in 2007 and they need to pay for it, which just goes to show, the first investigations that she was a part of, when she didn't have that translator, no, not translator, interpreter and attorney, was a violation of her rights and they should have never examined her like that.
right.
Yeah, 100%.
Even if she was guilty, they handled the case completely wrong. And it was so sloppy that they there's no credibility there, even if she had killed Meredith. And because of the way that they handled it, more people are leading towards the other way because there, again, is no credibility. How can we believe all the evidence that you put out there? And I'm sure, like, the European Court of Human Rights said, you, sorry, you didn't do it right. We can't say she's guilty because you were sloppy.
Yeah, smacking a person of interest around is not okay.
No. On December 4th, 2020, so like last year, like, 2 months ago, an Italian court ruled that Gude could complete his term by doing community service. So he is officially out of jail doing community service. 5 years after the murder, the city of Perugia and its University of Foreigners, in cooperation with Italian embassy in London, 5 years after the murder, the city of Perugia and its University for Foreigners, in cooperation with the Italian embassy in London, instituted a scholarship fund to honor the memory of Meredith Kercher.
And that's the story of Amanda Knox.
So, I mean, I think obviously we need to remember, like, someone died. Meredith was murdered. And the sad part about this whole thing is because the Italian police had already predetermined it was Amanda. If it was Amanda, we won't know because they handled it completely wrong. And if it wasn't Amanda, there is someone out there who killed Meredith. And nobody knows who it is because they handled it completely wrong.
Could be Gude, who's been serving it. Probably Gude, but there is still also a possibility that it was someone else, but I don't know if I could get on board with Amanda being the one who did it. It just doesn't
Right.
seem like it's enough.
Again, to me, it always goes back to the motivation. Her motivation was just not strong enough for her. I mean, not getting along with your roommates, that is not a strong enough motivation to kill your roommate. Unless you're like a complete sociopath.
But I also think if we just look at the objective evidence from the case, Amanda's not involved. Like, there's no DNA evidence of Amanda there. The DNA on the knife was found to be inconclusive. There was no evidence of her in Meredith's bedroom. It doesn't add up. And Gude was there. The evidence shows that. So the fact that they're looking to Amanda is literally for, I don't know what the right word would be, but
They essentially wanted to cover their asses.
Sensationalizing it.
Yeah.
Right.
They needed answers quick, and she was there already at the scene of the crime,
Even if what the police had theorized was true, that Raphael and Amanda and Rudy were all at the apartment at the same time and something went awry, why was Rudy the only one who fled? Why wouldn't Amanda and Raphael also flee with him?
Or at least come
Right.
up
Why
with
would
like
it
a
be a
good
group?
Yeah, sorry.
An alibi as a group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because I mean that whole thing, everything they went through too, he had like a separate trial as well. Whereas Raphael and Amanda were together during theirs. But even like you're talking about these theories from the police, so it's actually like a fact that the lead prosecutor on the case, Giuliano, I'm going to butcher his name, Mignini, maybe. He was widely criticized for the way he like handled this case, and a lot of the theories lead back to him. He was the one who started them, including like that she was a devil worshiper and stuff. Like, following their acquittals in 2014, Knox's and Sausalito's, he was disciplined by the Italian Council of Magistrates for the violation of correct procedure in this case. So yeah, I mean, I think that also just goes to show,
Yeah.
not great.
Yeah. And at the time when the first sentence was handed down and they were guilty, he's on tape saying to the documentary he was regarded as a hero and that the Italian people loved him and that he couldn't go anywhere without being recognized and thanked for putting, the monster Amanda away. And so it kind of seemed like part of it came from fame, or from the, desire to have fame. And there, he's out there in front of the press with his pipe and his really like decorative robes, and he just looks like he's searching for that.
It's also a little irritating to hear that this happened in 2007, and the first time they had found Amanda and Raphael guilty, they sentenced them to like 25 years, right? Is that right? It was in the mid 20s they had sentenced them.
Yeah, 25 for Raphael, 26 for Amanda.
And then the second time around, when they tried to sentence them, it was another like 25 years, right? And then you look at Gude, who was clearly there that night, and he was just released 2 months ago. It is 2021. How long was that? That wasn't very long. He was in prison for 13 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the most 14 if he had been convicted in 2017. And I think he might have been because it was a fast track
Yeah, it was.
So
trial.
Yeah.
they were trying to get they were trying to get Amanda and Raphael for double the time that Rudy spent in jail. That just sounds, I mean, to me, well, obviously it's unfair, right? I mean, Rudy was actually in Meredith's room that night. Amanda was not.
Agreed. What I find weird is if this had been a case in America, it wouldn't have just been 25 years.
No.
It would have been a lifetime sentence, if not the death penalty.
Right.
Well, depending what state, but you know what I mean.
Do you think it would have been the same if it was a foreigner who was here?
Depending on the type of foreigner, we know how.
Yeah, because
America
I
deals
just
with
think,
certain things.
I think they got all up in arms because obviously it was a foreigner in another country. So if it wasn't just one of ours, if it had happened here and it was someone from another foreign country, would we have reacted the same way?
I think possibly, but I think with the US, and I'm surprised Italy didn't do this, they are afraid to ruin relations with certain countries. So depending on what country they were from, it would say how cooperative that country and the US would have been if it was a foreigner who had killed here. But I mean, again, it just depends on the country. So, like, for example, if it was someone who was from the UK, I think that that would have been a different conversation than it would be from somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, it's very interesting, and it's definitely different because obviously Amanda Knox is alive, and as well as she can be, she seems to be successful from her webpage that I was looking at last night. She's got quite a few things going on.
She seems to be doing a lot of activist work, I think she did some work for the Innocence Project for a while. Yeah, she seems to be very like active out there in the criminal justice field.
Yeah, her
Right.
podcast is like true crime about true crime. So like it's yeah, I think that's what the title is. So it's like diving deeper into cases where there wasn't justification kind of like hers.
It's also quite irritating because, and I'm sure Amanda feels the same about this, because the case is always the case of Amanda Knox. It's not who killed Meredith Kercher, which should be the real question. And at this point, what are we discussing? Did Amanda Knox kill her instead of who killed Meredith Kercher, which should really be the subject of this case rather than trying to pin it on this one person. And I think that's what the media and the Italian police did, is they centered it on Amanda rather than Meredith.
Yeah, and that's why we did a good like not a great, but like we did a chunk in our story right now about who Meredith was because she wasn't just some, exchange student from Leeds who was ready to enjoy, her time abroad. This was her death, and she was murdered by someone, and she deserves to be known in this case, not everything focused so highly on Amanda being a possible suspect for it. I just feel
Okay.
bad, for her mom and her dad because John Kercher was a very big, like, was very involved and like outspoken about it too. And they're just parents who want answers for their child who was abroad. They were already nervous about her going abroad to begin with, and she was really excited about it, is what I had read. She was very dedicated to wanting to spend time in Italy, and the fact that she picked Italy as one of the less or the more safe options amongst the ones that she had for her study abroad, it just makes it a little bit more sad.
I think so too. Yeah, because she had the expectation and the thought that it would be a good choice. It would be like a safe choice. And then for something, I mean, this is every like parent's nightmare. And then it came true. Yeah. Anyway, so that is the murder of Meredith Kercher and the trial of Amanda Knox.
That was really great, you guys. That was really good coverage.
Thanks.
Hey, Liv, do you have a missing person for us today?
Yeah, I have our missing person for today. Our missing person for today, her name is Abby Lynn Patterson. She was born on February 15th, 1997. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She is 5'7" and weighed about 140 pounds. Her race is white, and she has a tattoo of a bird on her shoulder and a birthmark on the back of her right thigh. Patterson was last seen wearing brown shorts and a white shirt. Patterson was last seen on Tuesday, September 5th, 2017, around 11:30 a.m. She left her home on East 9th Street in Lumberton, North Carolina, and was seen getting into a brown Buick. Patterson has not been seen since and has not had any contact with family and friends. So if you have any information on Abby Lynn Patterson, who has been missing since September 5th, 2017, she is from Lumberton, North Carolina, please contact the FBI authorities or the Charlotte Division of the FBI and the Lumberton Police Department in North Carolina. You can contact the FBI Charlotte Field Office at 704-672-6100 or the Lumberton Police Department at 910-671-3845.
Thanks, Liv. We'll post photos of Abby Lynn Patterson on our Instagram page and on our Facebook. So if you have an opportunity, please go check those out. And then if you know anything, please contact the FBI field office. All right. Anything else, ladies?
That's it.
The Marma team, we're out.